Captain America has perhaps become the most symbolic character of standing one's ground, and to follow the righteous path of truth and honour. And for the overall character arc, that might be true. But what about the man underneath the American banner? We all want to be a hero, but with that want finds the right kind of role models. We perhaps want to grow up and follow in their footsteps because they encourage the right kind of morals that we want to reflect. And for any Avenger, for any character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Steve Rogers, Captain America, reflected this with a passion. This is 2 takes, and this is 1 shot. An analysis of understanding the Avenger, Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers, within this Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline, was introduced to us whilst the world was within a war. His arc carried his want and obsession to be enlisted in the infantry because he wanted to do his part and to essentially stop the bullies, no matter where they came from. America was like his little brother, and he wanted to protect him. Now remember, he wasn't there to shoot some Nazis because of what the propaganda said. He was there to protect his 1940s way of American life, the state pride, and even for some adventure. Romance didn't really have a say, as Steve at this point understood he was meant for more than what was handed to him, and he knew where his strengths lay, even if it wasn't obvious in his physique at this point. The aspect of showing someone small to have a big heart was not missed with this character, even though at some points at the very beginning he would get beaten up. But hey, his heart was in the right place. And what was most important was his bravery and standing by what he said. He was brought up in a different era that had different values. America, his America, said what they meant, did what they said they were going to do. And we can see that Steve did the same. He knew what was right and wrong, and this would prove to be essential throughout the films. But remember, he wasn't just another cog in a machine with ideas of patriotism and brotherhood, although for a while at the very beginning it would seem that way. The scene that involves a flagpole at Camp Leo, just before Steve was given the serum, has become one of the most impactful scenes in the story arc. This scene showed how different Steve was in his way of thinking, in his compassion, his humbleness, and how all of those things cannot be seen from the outside, because at that point, he was only being judged by what can be seen through his physique. And true, this scene can be related to Disney's 1998 Mulan scene, the same sort of action, but with an arrow in a wooden pole. But the conclusion still shows the same. Steve did not try and push his team away, to struggle and fight whilst trying to shimmy up that pole for the glory of the prize. He thought about the task at hand and analysed the angles by looking up and down at what he was supposed to do. He then took the hook holding the pole up and let it fall to the ground, making the ease of simply picking up the flag to give to his instructor. Hell, he even had the grace to say thank you sir as he hands over the flag. Humble and quiet in his victories, Steve was always going to be the best candidate for the serum. What he didn't realise was that later on, instead of being brilliant at just taking orders, he would live up to his name and become the captain of his team of Avengers. But let's not jump ahead. So you ask, why was Steve Rogers chosen for the super soldier serum compared to those stronger and faster candidates? Because of what he had on the inside. His famous words, "I could do this all day," could be seen as a pain in the ass for any of his adversaries, or a bout of bravery of standing ground rather than running away. Either way, he was chosen because of what counted on the inside. Dr. Abraham Erskine said to Steve's question onto why he was chosen, "The serum amplifies everything that is inside, so good becomes great, bad becomes worse. This is why you were chosen, because a strong man who has known power all his life may lose respect for that power, but a weak man knows the value of strength and knows compassion." Erskine knew that just making a super soldier wouldn't be enough for what lay ahead. Having someone strong and to follow orders would be great, but granting a person a serum that enhances everything from the inside out, Steve just physically enhanced what his heart could reflect, and that served far more than even the Doctor could ever dream of. Going back to what was said about Steve becoming a leader more than just another cog in the wheel, is only proven by Steve's unshakable belief of good and bad in each decision, as well as the sudden need to adapt in the future. And I'm talking about this as a slow transition too. Sure, Steve went behind enemy lines to bring back the soldiers that were left there, going against orders, but that was only the beginning, in his first standalone film. In all of the films where he is the main character or part of the Avengers, Steve was still a man learning about himself. This state of transition is most likely easier to visually see through Steve's costume changes of being Captain America throughout the MCU. So let's take a look. The obvious patriotic red, white and blue flagged Captain America outfit is a personification of a great America in times of war. There to lead the troops and to show American confidence, Steve wore it with pride, finally able to do his part in the war effort. Or did he? We find him following the orders of people, making him become this icon. When it came to actually going to the front lines and being faced with the realness of war, his sparkly suit and words had no effect. And he contemplated his purpose, whilst he doodled himself as a dancing monkey, reflecting his thoughts on the whole thing. But then, his true heroism comes to pass as he wanders back to camp with the missing troops later on. In this film, Captain America, the first Avenger, he was a proud American, showing it in his costume, action, and words. The whole package, you could say. In The Winter Soldier, with the whole film emphasising the concept of there not being a perfect government, and that things can go wrong even in the right places, we have Steve immediately in a stealth suit for a stealth job. This truly reflects the film as we see how corrupt America, this future America, is for Steve. People are keeping secrets, compartmentalizing information, and no one is who they say they are outright, hence the stealth suit. This obviously doesn't go down well with Steve's moral compass, and so, by choosing not to trust those in power, in the government, and protecting secrets and information for a friend's sake, Steve goes on the run with Natasha in civilian clothing. It's only when he decides to storm the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters to flush out the Hydra agents and stop their plans does his sense of what he had in the 1940s come back. He steals a World War II patriotic American costume from the museum, and being loud and proud, walks in the front doors and makes a commotion with Falcon in tow. What becomes interesting is how the storyline merges with the costumes and how this is reflected time and again. As at the end of Winter Soldier, it is Bucky, still brainwashed, but remembering Steve slightly, who saves him by dragging Steve from the water to the riverbank. Dragging the idea of America that Steve had that had become dirty over time. Better than before, not completely blacked out like the stealth suit, but not completely clean either. In Steve's mind, the future America has changed drastically. In Age of Ultron, the costume changes again to a more modernised version of the World War II outfit, with the ideal still in place, and with a caution towards this new America, of learning the game that people are less trusting than before, but still not backing down on his morals. In Civil War, when the unrest of government goes further to try and censor him and his fellow Avengers, does it take a turn for the worse. The costume is still seen from Age of Ultron, but at the end of the film, much like coming to a decision, Steve and some of the Avengers are on the run, are not in alliance with the government, and so the costume changes again to a complete black outfit. Still suited for the same purpose, but governed by Steve's own morals. He has turned his back on America. We find Steve in an Infinity War, with the same darkened costume, but with a beard and longer hair, almost like he was weathered to changes. It's only in Endgame, when the understanding that there is a universe to save, when Steve and Tony are put aside their differences, does the American costume come back into the picture. There are bigger fish to fry, and this time away, and this forgiveness between himself and Tony, have Steve come to terms with his troubles with future America. There was a time for the opportunity of starting again because of everything Thanos has done. When half of all life was wiped out of existence, the only thing Steve could do was try and adapt again and try to move forward. Some found it harder than others though. Throughout the Marvel films, all in all, Steve Rogers never had the time to adapt, if you think about it. When Sam asked him what he was going to do and what made him happy, Steve did not have an answer, and throughout the films, the question is never really answered until right at the end. It's not answered until then because he's never really considered it before. Steve grew up in a world where things for him made sense. He understood what was expected of him and what you should expect in turn, and this made him who he was. Selfless. But we have to remember, he wasn't really a complete person before Winter Soldier. He was just adapting and taking orders as they came. Everything he strived for in his first film, he got. He got the adventure, to serve his country, but it cost him some of his conscience and time to get to know himself. He became more complete after Winter Soldier because he wasn't a cog in the machine anymore. He wasn't blindly following orders. He was showing compassion, disagreeing with people in power, like the Doctor knew he would. Making the right decisions based on his morals and his heart. But to truly understand himself, it seems Steve Rogers had to wake up in a world he doesn't understand. And like Bucky said to him all those years ago, where they're going is the future, and he's with him until the end of the line. His best quality is how he did not change who he was throughout the entire time he was in the future. It was only when he was tasked with placing all the Infinity Stones back to where they were meant to be in the timeline, by going back in certain moments in time, did we realise he still misses his old life. And who wouldn't? A quote from DerekWinnert.com has Chris Evans, who plays Captain America, explaining it further. It's not so much his shock in technology, it's more about the societal differences. He's gone from the 1940s to today. He comes from a world where people are a little more trusting, the threat's not so deep. Now, it's harder to tell who's right and wrong. Actions you take to protect people from threats could compromise liberties and privacy. That's tough for Steve to swallow. As well as having his best friend by his side in this new America, it's still really up to Steve to adapt by eventually letting go. And like I said earlier, he does so, metaphorically speaking, with his costumes and a reflection on the government. But there's also the letting go of seeing himself as an Avenger, as a defender of America, the world, and in the end, the universe. His patriotic stance of being the moral heart of the MCU does not go unnoticed. However, his worth is far more than we can ever comprehend, as even Thor's hammer found him worthy to wield the powers of a god. We need to remember that Captain America is also Steve Rogers, just a kid from Brooklyn. Throughout the fast-paced, world-saving antics of the MCU, in the end, Steve Rogers just wanted to grow old and finally be at peace. Because he had a moment, a woman, from the past that made him happy within the chaos. And because Steve is a romantic at heart, this, in my opinion, is the ultimate love story throughout the MCU where Steve finally gets the gal. And of course, you've got to remember, he did promise her a dance.
If you have enjoyed what was said, please follow me on Anchor, Spotify, and other podcasting platforms to never miss an episode. Be kept in the loop for new content on my Instagram and Twitter page. For more of a visual appeal, I've introduced a YouTube channel. And if you enjoy to read what was said instead, follow my blog, linked elsewhere. I'm a podcaster that enjoys this process, and it wouldn't have been made a reality without you, the listener. And so, I thank you for listening, and I hope you stick around for more.